Dynamite Cop is very similar to other 3D beat-em-ups. It reminds me a lot of Die Hard the arcade game, which is because it's a sequel to Die Hard the arcade game, or at least in the same series. We got a version of it that's different. It's pretty fun, but it does have its limitations in terms of gameplay, and also it's a relatively short game. Each of the missions is only about 30 minutes long, so you can get through it pretty quick. This is one of those full releases that probably didn't meet everyone's expectations just because of how short it was. So this is actually part of a series of 3 games. You have Die Hard the Arcade, which was the first, and then Dynamite Cop, and then Asian Dynamite. I remember Die Hard the Arcade a lot because it was the best game in the good movie theater that I used to go to. I wish I had played more of it, and I wish I had the home console release, but one was never released in the United States. That was the PS2 version. And then the Sega Saturn version I had no idea about, and I'm not all that motivated to start collecting Saturn games just to get it. The third game in the series, Asian Dynamite, that was only released in Japanese arcades, and honestly, it would be great if all 3 of these games would come to some modern console, like in a collection. I'm guessing they would have to do something with Die Hard the Arcade, because that one, has the Die Hard license. The other 2 don't have to worry about that. But it still would be nice to have all 3 of these games. Sega's common strategy at the time was to take their arcade games and use those as kind of a basis for really their launch library. They would also do this for other games that would just come to their home console. So you have stuff like Golden Axe, Outrun, and of course Dynamite Cop that all made their way to home consoles in the 90s, 80s, and in the 2000s. Sega did this a lot. They still kind of do this, but now they don't have to worry about having a home console anymore. There are 3 scenarios to this game, and they kind of act as the missions that you're going to be going on. There are a few graphical changes to them, but essentially they're going to pretty much be the same. If you really want to play through this game, the first mission's about a half an hour long, the other 2 are about the same, so expect to be playing this for about an hour and a half to 2 hours. Or if you're really good at it, you might be able to get it done faster. The first mission has you fighting pirates, or at least something like a pirate, because you fight some weird stuff later on. It's just kind of strange. But you're on a cruise ship and you're trying to save the president's daughter. Since the characters from Data East Bad Dudes aren't around anymore, it's up to these 3 characters. And I really wish the game had asked me if I was a bad enough dude to save her, or at least bad enough to save her. It would have made me feel a little bit happier. It wouldn't have made any sense in the game, but it would have made me smile. Things kind of go off the rails a little bit when you're playing it, because it's supposed to be pirates, but you end up fighting some weird stuff, like a giant octopus. No idea why, but you just fight a giant octopus at some point. It's a pretty funny moment. I like it quite a bit. I thought it was really funny. Maybe some other people didn't like it, but yeah, it's a pretty hilarious game just for how over the top it gets. The story isn't anything amazing, but it gets the job done. The gameplay in this is very good for what it is. It's a 3D cinematic beat-em-up that uses QuickTime events to help you transition to the different rooms you're going to be fighting in. You'll also get some short cutscenes to tell you what's happening and just why you're in the different locations, which is kind of nice. I mean, it's better than just wandering down the street. Since the levels are a lot smaller, you're not having the same freedom of movement. The screen will lock, but it has to, because you go into a room and it's just filled with bad guys, and you have to fight them until they're all gone. That's the same pattern that's going to repeat throughout the entire game, so it might get a little monotonous as you're playing, but it's a short game, so it won't be that big of a deal. If you've played any other beat 'em up, you know exactly what you need to do. just beat the crap out of the enemies that appear on the screen. You're either going to be punching them, kicking them. You can pick up weapons to shoot them. You can also pick up just different things in the environment and bash them against the guys. So you can pick up arcade games. You can pick up a tray of apples and throw those at the other guys, which I just find hilarious. That's one thing that I love about this game. It just takes something absurd and it turns it into a weapon. In some ways, it feels a little bit like Power Stone, and once I look into those games, maybe I'll find some connections between this and the Power Stone series. You never know. Just a few of the weird things that you can pick up. I know I mentioned the tray of apples, which I find hilarious, and the arcade machine, but you can also pick up barbells, a loaf of French bread, a deck brush, an entire tuna, or an iron pipe, and sushi. There's a lot of weird stuff that you can throw at enemies in this, and it's very, very funny when it happens. Like, how is apples knocking someone out just by me throwing them at them? Or why am I beating a man with a piece of tuna? It's very funny. You can also get a handgun, machine gun, missile launcher, triple bazooka, anti-tank rifle, and an anti-ship missile. That stuff, for the most part, makes sense. I don't know why you're picking up an anti-ship missile and it's blowing up just the people and not the rest of the people in the environment, or like blowing up the ship itself, but whatever. Just suspend disbelief for a minute and enjoy the game. You also get some health items like a capsule, there's like a little health drink you can pick up, and a first aid kit. I never found these to be particularly useful. They're there, but I didn't really care. You can also pick up other power-ups as well that make you a little bit stronger. For the most part, you don't need those because the game gives you unlimited continues, so you don't really need the health items or anything like that. But again, nice that they're there, not really necessary. There are also 3 playable characters, which is pretty standard for a Sega beat-em-up. Dynamite Cop is a really good-looking game for 1998. The Dreamcast is a wonderful system, and the games released for it hold up a lot better than those on the PS1 and also on the N64. I know comparing these systems isn't really fair all the time, but that's kind of what was out there at the time. The only bad thing that I really can point to is the tracking system in the game. It can be a little hard to make sure that you're actually lined up against the right enemy, or that you're able to quickly switch between the different enemies. It's just annoying, like really annoying at times. The cutscenes look really good. They really aren't there for very long, but they don't need to be. They're just there to tell you, hey, this is where the plot's going, this is how the game is advancing. It's exactly what you need it to be. I will say this, once you get to the last boss, though, that's where just everything kind of goes to hell, at least in my opinion, especially from a visual standpoint, because he'll teleport around on this little crow's nest that he's on, and it can be hard to line up with him or even know exactly where you're supposed to be. That was the only thing that bothered me. When you get to the QuickTime events, it's pretty easy to see what you're supposed to do. That way, when you mess up, like I did a few times, it's your own fault. It's no one else's. I kind of like that, where, hey, it's my fault that I did this, or something like that. I like that. Just knowing that maybe I can get better at something instead of the game screwing me over. That's always something nice to see. The graphics are really nice. I just like the way Dreamcast games look, and they haven't really aged bad. They still look pretty good. They're better than a lot of the PlayStation 1 and the N64, and also the Sega Saturn games that were released around this time. Just because they're supposed to be. This was a more advanced system than those, so yeah, that's pretty much where we're at with that. While I like Dynamite Cop a lot, there are some pretty significant problems that can't really be ignored. It's a short game, and it came out at a time when you would have expected video games to have been longer. It worked fine in the arcades, but once it got brought to the home console, you would have expected more from it. There is quite a bit of bonus content to it, which is great, and that's kind of fun. But that doesn't really cover up for the fact that the base game is not really all that long. It is a funny game. It's easy to learn. You have infinite continues, which is great. But tracking the enemies can be a little bit hard, and again, it's not a very long game. If you want to read something funny, like a funny review about it, check out the Cincinnati Enquirer's review of it, where the guys seem pretty confused by the concept of a beat-em-up game. He makes some good points about the price, but I think he's just flat out wrong, because he seemed to just be completely confused by the genre and what he was actually playing. It's always fun to go back and read these reviews that were in newspapers when you didn't really expect that as a kid. I don't think too many people went to actual newspapers for reviews on video games. Maybe somebody did, but I don't ever remember doing it. Anyway, that's going to wrap things up. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will talk to you all later. Bye.